Around the Ozarks is now on your FM radio. Listen to Around the Ozarks mornings with Grace Gooley as I spotlight local people, stories, and podcasts, all while playing the country legends of the 90s and the hit makers of the 2000s. It's on the Ozarks' best country, 105.1 The Bull. Welcome to Beyond a Gate, a podcast sharing the grit, growth, and spirit of rural life. From fields to front porches, this is where the heart of agriculture comes to life. Today we go beyond the gate and inside the business world of farming with a dear friend and educator, Wesley Tucker. You wear many hats at the university, but field specialist in agriculture business at the University of Missouri Extension. Thanks for joining me today.
Thanks for having me.
So I mentioned those many hats. So I did a little Googling.
Scary.
I'm not going to embarrass you. But before I ask you what you do, I'm going to tell you what the university says you do. Okay. So the topics you were able to speak on: agriculture business management, big broad, right?
Right.
Agriculture law, taxation, boring. Marketing and risk management.
Right.
The one I want you to speak on today: women in agriculture. You can speak about women in agriculture?
Sure.
Absolutely. Good job. No, we're not going to talk about that. But, you go to a profile on the university's page, and I was like, none of those are actually why I invited you in today. But before we go to that, what do you do for MU Extension?
So I've been with the university 24 years now, and I was hired as, they used to call us farm management specialists back then. Now they call us ag business specialists. But so I do a broad range of things that producers can utilize, such as livestock marketing. Right now the livestock markets have been up, they've been down, they've been all over the place. So livestock marketing, you mentioned taxes. I help teach tax classes for tax preparers as well as farmers to help them figure out how to use the tax code to their best benefit. Yeah, taxes can be boring, but if you use it for your benefit, there can be good things. Also, personality assessments, human resources. I do quite a bit of stuff in farm labor today. But what you asked me to talk about today is farm succession. And that's probably my number one passion, is farm succession, how to help families transfer the farm from one generation to the next. I discovered a long time ago, I think the greatest risk to families is not commodity prices. I don't think it's government regulation. I think it's, will the kids get along after you're gone?
I remember you spoke to my boss. My boss. Outside of the world of podcasting, I am in marketing, and I work for Heritage Bank of the Ozarks. Small little plug to a little community bank. But we invited you to speak to all of our, not all, but 100 of our farmers and rancher customers about succession planning. And I knew I needed to be there in the room to listen, and I made sure my husband was there. I made sure my brother was there, and our eyes were like this the whole time, wide open. And I remember you said that, and I don't remember the details of the story, but your goal was to make sure that families still had holiday gatherings after you were gone.
Right.
And Kim shares that story all the time too, and how important it is. It hit people right here in the heart to think about their family not gathering after their death because they couldn't decide how to split the farm. They couldn't decide how to plan.
If you think about it, families that don't have any assets, people that don't have a lot of money, after the funeral, the kids go out to eat, they get together. There's nothing to squabble about. And so they continue to have Thanksgiving and Christmas gatherings at the family home, and they stick together. But when you add stuff into the equation, it gets complicated and it gets messy. And the world of family dynamics is a very messy world, especially when you add something like a farm, which today is worth thousands and thousands or millions of dollars. And so it does get complicated. And that's one of the things that I think is so important, is that people take this seriously and do something about it while they're here. And as you said, so that the kids don't have to work it out after they're gone.
So where do you start?
Yeah. Communication, right? So you communicate early and you communicate often. And starting that conversation is very difficult, whether you're the next generation or whether you're mom and dad. No one wants to talk about mortality, right? No one wants to
Right.
talk about dying. But unfortunately, none of us are getting out of this alive. We're all going to die at some point. And so making that preparation for that the next generation will have a chance to continue the farm is extremely important. And often we have different expectations between the farming kids and the off-farm kids that have moved away and went on to other careers and things like that. And so it's really important to start opening the lines of communication and talking about that stuff and making a plan so that the next generation has a chance to be successful.
Do you typically see that? I'll call my generation the kids, okay? And because personally, you know, my parents. Do you see the kids bringing it up to the parents more, or do you see the parents, grandparents bringing it up to that next generation more?
Very seldom. I don't know. I don't know if. I guess when you think about how often, but often it's the kids wanting to bring it up because they want to know what their future is. You know, for dad or mom or grandpa or grandma to talk about dying is something that it's just not natural to want to come up and talk about that. And I think we are getting better at it. You know, there was a time when people said, you'll find out what's in the will or the trust after I'm gone, right? And they just didn't discuss it. And there's still a lot of people that use that strategy today, but I think we're getting a few less of them because they're realizing, wait, if I want to help my kids, I've got to take this seriously now. And I always say, if you're someone that's going to tell me, my kids get along pretty good, I think they'll work it out, my advice is go get the for sale sign now, because that's probably what's going to happen to a significant chunk of the farm.
Okay, I want to talk about on-farm and off-farm kids. And I don't know if that's now the best time, but I think that's some terminology that we could define right now.
Right.
You've got kid A and kid B. On the farm, never came back after college or after school. What do you do?
So the problem is land values, right? I mean, as land gets more valuable, more expensive, depending on if you're selling it or buying it, right? You know, as you look at that today, if I walked into the bank or you walk into the bank tomorrow and say, my parents passed away, I'm one of 3 or 4 kids, Mr. Banker, can you give me the loan to buy out my siblings? Unfortunately, the answer often is going to be no, because it won't cash flow, right? The value of the land has surpassed its ability to pay for itself by farming it. Doesn't mean farmland's not a good investment. It's a tremendous investment because it goes up in value every year, but it doesn't pay for itself. So there's a difference between cash flow and wealth accumulation, right? There's a difference between how much cash it'll generate to be able to pay for itself and the wealth that it accumulates by owning it. And so that's one of the things, one of the areas that really changed my perspective on this was in 2012. You mentioned women in ag. I happened to be at a women in ag educators conference, and I saw an instructor put up a slide where he said, is your goal just passing the land to your kids and letting them do whatever they want to with it? Split it up, sell it, do whatever they want to with it? Or is your goal actually seeing the family business continue? And if you want one of your kids farming your land 5 years after you're gone, 10 years after you're gone, then you're going to have to look at this a little bit differently. And one of the things you're going to have to consider is the whole inheritance, fair versus equal, all of that type stuff that brings up a lot of really difficult conversations. Let's transitioning to that kid who is to take over the farm business, the farm. When should you start having that conversation? We said communicate, but how do you prepare them for that? And what are some take-home messages you can jot down right now, you know, to prepare, whether you're that kid or you're that parent hoping to prepare that kid? So I get a chance to talk to a lot of beginning farmer conferences, young producer meetings across the country. And one of the things that I always ask every one of those groups is, do you know whose future you're building? Do you know the work that you are doing as part of the farm operation is building your future and your kids' future, or is there a chance you're building someone else's future, right? Because there's lots of things that can go wrong. And if you're operating on promises like this will all be yours someday, those promises aren't worth anything, right? You need to know that you're building your future. And so let's dive off just a second for the difference between estate planning and succession planning, right?
Ooh,
They're very,
okay.
very different. They're very different. And so I like to describe it like everyone can imagine a bucket. So you got a feed bucket, you know, or a bucket of hydraulic fluid or something like, you know, you got a bucket. So you put all your assets in that bucket. You put your land, your livestock, your machinery, your planters, your combine, everything, your cash, everything you own in your bucket. Estate planning relies on the event of your death. You hold everything in your bucket until the day you die, and then your bucket dumps upside down and spills out on your heirs. That is the event that triggers the estate plan to go into action. Succession planning starts with the exact same bucket, but it says, in a short amount of time beyond this, I want my kids managing some of the things in my bucket and getting to own some of the things in my bucket. And a couple years beyond that, I want them getting to manage a little bit more in my bucket. And succession planning is actually a process, not an event. So we make a planned roadmap of how that process will evolve over time, and that those assets will slowly transition from one generation to the next, with the next generation knowing their direct efforts is building their future. And so, you know, if I'm relying on estate planning, well, what could possibly go wrong, right? We've got a great trust, we've got a great will, whatever those type things that you think you do. But what happens if the wrong person dies first? What happens if divorce happens?
You can't plan for it.
Yeah, the financial problems. What happens if mom and dad go into a nursing home? What happens if my brother or sister comes in at the last and says, "Hey, Mom, sign this," after I've been part of the farm for the last 25 years? There's too many things that can go wrong. A lot of us have carried a bucket of water to a sick cow or something like that. How full do you fill that bucket? Do you fill it all the way up to the rim with water and try to carry it? Do you,
knowing
Jamie?
you're going to splash out?
I was going to say, what happens if you do that?
Yeah, you lose a quarter of it.
You spill. It spills, right? And so when we try to rely on estate planning to hold everything in that full bucket, there's too much spillage that can happen. What you probably heard in that workshop, I talked about one of the greatest risk for women for their children getting the farm is, unfortunately, if they die first. Mm-hmm. Because who normally dies first? The man or the woman in a marriage? Who normally dies first?
The man.
The man, because we don't take care of ourselves,
yes.
right? So we typically go first. Well, if the man goes first, how often does mom remarry? Not very often, right?
She can take care of herself.
She can take care of herself. That's exactly right. But if if the mom happens to die first, what's dad going to do?
He needs someone to make his dinner.
He has to have someone take care of himself. That's exactly right. So he will be remarried usually, often within a year, definitely within 2 years. And so I'm your son or daughter. I've been a part of the farm for the last 30 years. And boy, we got an estate plan that says I get the farm. But what happens if dad remarries? Those things can all get changed. And so I'm very blunt to the young producers. You need to have that definite roadmap for how you are building your future.
And I've seen that roadmap. I see it in my brain right now because I've listened to you speak before. But let's go through those steps, because an estate plan is a will, a trust. They're legally bound.
They're part of it. They're part of it.
But how do you make that roadmap hold up in court? So maybe that's not the best question.
Yeah, let's back up. So I talk about 5 phases to developing my roadmap. I mean, if I'm going to go from Springfield, Missouri, where we're at today, to someplace on vacation, I get out a map to figure out how to get from where I am today to my planned destination. That's what a succession plan is. It's a roadmap. So that roadmap has 5 phases for me. The first one is I always send the younger generation away before they're allowed to come back. Mm-hmm. That doesn't mean every kid's going to go to college, but I want them going and working for someone else and getting other skills that they can come back and make my operation better. Ideally, I'd love it if they could work for a good boss and a bad boss so that they get to see the difference. That's phase 1. When they do come back, phase 2 is what I call a trial work period. And in that trial work period, I pay them a salary just like I would any other worker that I hire for me. And that is basically a testing period to say, can we balance the challenges of being family members and business partners at the same time? And can I balance those two worlds? At the end of that trial work period, I go to phase 3, which is where they start getting to take on management and ownership. And at that point in phase 3, where they start becoming a business partner, they get to start owning something. If they've been a part of your farm for more than 5 years and they don't own anything, how do they know they're building their own future? They could be building their future stepmom's future or the nursing home's future. Mm-hmm. Phase 4 is advanced management and ownership, and by that point it has to include the financial side, the relationship side of the business. And then the final phase is phase 5, is they become the majority manager and at least a big chunk of ownership in the farm or ranch. And so if we follow that roadmap, by phase 3, they're getting to own something. They're getting to manage something. Not only are we preparing them to take over when we're gone, but they are also building their equity. Too many times, we hold all the cards in our bucket, in our estate planning bucket, and spillage can happen. So I want them actually building their own equity.
And I think this would be different for, I don't think, it will be different for every operation,
Absolutely.
Every farm.
Absolutely.
But how many times do you see it happening that transitions too late? You've got 85-year-old, 90-year-old grandpa who hasn't turned over anything to their son, and then that son or daughter is still wants to come back and maybe has left to gain that experience, that education. And then so you got 3 generations.
Absolutely.
Still trying to figure it out. How often does that happen?
A lot. So I can't tell you how many producers I know that are 60, 65, 70, and they're still answering
to
manager.
Dad.
They're still answering to dad or grandpa, right? They're still, and if you think about it, it is interesting. Let's just talk about families in general. When someone is not in business with their own family members, when they become 18 and leave the home, they become an adult. And they're no longer under their parents' thumb, so to speak. But when you grow up working in the family business, it's extremely hard to ever step out of that role of subordinate son or daughter. How do you become an equal business partner? That's really difficult. So often, as you said, we get a generation that's ready to retire, and they've never taken over, and so we have generation skipping.
When I remember meetings, and I'm skipping around because things are jogging my memory, and it resonates because it hits home. But you talk about communicate, and then I remember you talking about the importance of if you set up this succession plan, those weekly, monthly, annual meetings and who's involved, and how that incorporates those on the farm working the day-to-day.
Right.
That may involve a stepmom, potentially, that off-farm kid. How do those relationships work within this perfect model?
So realize you have different groups of people that have different communication needs, right? So I talk about 3 completely different types of farm meetings for farm operations. So farm operating meetings, if I ask a family, do you have family meetings? They might say, yeah, every Monday morning we get together and we talk about what fields need to be sprayed or what cattle need to be worked this week. Well, those are really operational meetings, right? So let's envision an airplane that's hovering right above the ground. It's 5,000 foot above the ground. What can it see? Well, it can see, okay, yep, there's a field that needs to be sprayed or planted, or there's a group of cattle that need to be fed or worked. It sees the immediate needs. Those are operating meetings. They're important, but they're just operating meetings. Business meetings, we want to back that plane up to 30,000 foot now and get a broader view of the farmer ranch and all of the things around it, right? What are opportunities that we need to be exploiting? What are threats that might be coming? We've all heard the SWOT analysis, all of that type of stuff, right? But unfortunately, we're really bad about not having those actual business meetings to talk about the business side of the business because we get way too busy doing the day-to-day operational things.
For me, I'd rather do the day-to-day.
Yep.
The business side, it makes my heart sink.
Right. It's hard.
Those are the hard decisions. And we're like, okay, well, what is our red line this year?
All right. And there's a third type of meeting, family council meetings that we can talk about later. But let me back up, Jamie. So what's the key to a great marriage?
Communication.
So let's just put you on the spot. Oh. So do you and your husband still have regular date night?
No.
No? Why not?
Because we had kids.
Because life, right? Life happens and you're busy. That's the same way with family businesses. Communication's the key, but we're too busy doing the day-to-day stuff.
Yeah.
So we all know that communicating date night will help us build a stronger marriage, just like family meetings will help us build a stronger family business, but we let things get in the way. So we have to prioritize it. So if I can get you doing date night before you're on the edge of contacting the divorce lawyer,
right,
we can build a stronger marriage. Unfortunately, we wait to start having business meetings until there's explosive issues that can bring down the farm operation. You know, it's when dad has just been diagnosed with cancer. The farm next door is available for sale. Do we actually try to buy it or not? Or if I see my brother one more time, I'm going to get the deer rifle and kill him. You know, it's when explosive issues are on foot. But if we can start having regular family meetings, just like date night, when there's not serious crisis mode attacking us, then we can build a stronger family business. And I mentioned the third and final family meeting is family council meetings. So the farm business meetings were for everyone involved in the farm. Family council meetings now include everyone in the broader family. And we try to do those at least once a year to basically just let everyone know in the family what's going on in the family business. Now, those are the meetings that really scare people, right?
Yeah.
Family business meetings are one thing, but I don't want to meet with all the rest of my family, my brothers and sisters that aren't part of the operation. And why don't we? It's because we know there's conflict, right? We know there's different expectations, different thoughts, different opinions.
Understanding.
Yeah. And so if we know there's differences of opinions and things and we just ignore them, they'll go away, right?
Sweep them under the rug.
Yeah, just stick our head in the sand. I've yet to look back on a scenario and say, I'm glad we just kept things secret. I'm glad we didn't talk about things. Are they fun initially? No. But if we can make families do them, it goes so much better for the family after you're gone.
Okay, so scenario. There is no blood kin to pass it down to. There's no, that succession plan is not going to stay in the family, but the farm has value.
Yep.
What comes, or the kids don't want to be part of it. What factors in that? Maybe that hired hand, or maybe that neighbor who's been a part of it.
Yeah. So I start every one of my workshops with a simple slide where I say, "Would you be happy if the day after your funeral, a caravan of livestock trailers showed up to take every critter you have to the sale barn to be sold? The local auction company is contacted to sell all your machinery off, and the kids stop by the realty office on the way home from the funeral." Of course, no one raises their hands, right? And so more and more people. So then we get into why this is important. But more and more people are starting to look at me and say, I've got 3 kids or 4 kids, but none of them want to take over the farm, and I still don't want to see that caravan of trailers showing up. I don't want to see that. And so I think it is becoming more and more of an opportunity to help a non-blood relative get started in farming. Let me give you a good example. Really large farmer, big herd of cattle, 4 kids. All got successful careers, but not a one of them wants to be out chopping ice in the winter or feeding cows. And so in meeting with the producer, we've talked about it, and he's like, well, I've got 2 key employees that have helped me get where I am. I don't want to see a dispersal sale of my cows after I'm gone. So we made a plan. He wants to retire in 10 years. And every year that each of these employees stay with him, they earn 2.5% of the cow herd. And so in 10 years, each employee will own 25% of the cow herd. They can go to the bank and borrow the money to buy the other remaining 50%. He did choose to leave the land to the 4 kids, but doing so with a 25-year lease to the 2 employees to give them a chance. And so I think that is the next step in succession planning, is figuring out how to help those producers that don't have a child that wants to come back and take over. And I think it not only helps the young producer. If you were to give your kids $5 million cash the day you died, which unfortunately today it doesn't take a real big farm that if you sell it can turn into millions of dollars in cash. If you leave your children several million in cash, will their life be better or worse in 5 years? Now, I'd like to hope it'll be better, But there are some advantages, too, to leaving your children a long-term assets that's going to continue to build wealth, and that they get some rental income off of it each year while also helping a young producer.
So it's a business, right? Whether it is a business, whether it's like a retail store or a farm store, something like that, or a farm, LLC, incorporated, turning that farm into some organization on the business side is important. How do you educate families on that? Because I'll tell you, my situation is, my dad was diagnosed with cancer at a young age and fought it for 10 years. But it wasn't until the last year or so that we're like, oh, maybe all this shouldn't just be in mom and dad's name. Maybe we should have an LLC, to turn this into a legitimate business. That's a conversation. But also, how do you know which one is best?
Well, there's lots of tools in the toolbox, and when you think about different entity structures and stuff like that, there's lots of different ways that you can go, and each one of the different types of entity structures has advantages and disadvantages from a tax perspective, from being able to transition, the assets from one person to the next, and that's where I often say you need a good professional team that includes and a good estate planning attorney that understands, agriculture. You don't want someone that does traffic tickets on Monday and divorces on Wednesday and then dabbles in estate planning. You want someone that really understands estate planning. You also need a good tax professional, because everything that we're talking about has income tax consequences. And then you also need a good financial planner, because what I've seen through my work is that families that diversify a little bit of their money and have some other liquid assets to be able to give to those off-farm kids makes this process a lot easier. So you need each of those professionals to be able to help advise you in your situation, because as you said, there is no one size fits all.
Well, I feel very prepared for this, because my next question was about that team.
Yep.
So I bring up a CPA, which would be that tax professional. The banker, which would be that financial planner, that attorney, that specialist. But then I include you in that team, and I know you're one person. But how often do you need that team to include that educator, that mediator, to lay it all out and ask the questions that they're scared to ask or don't know how to ask? Yeah,
and so there needs to be someone working with the professional team, driving the bus, getting everything done. Often that can be a family member. Maybe it's the younger generation, maybe it's mom or dad, but someone needs to be driving that bus and working with all the professionals. There are times that you need an outside person to come in and help do that, because there's enough differences of opinion, aka squabbles, things. And honestly, I have no data to back this up. But what I normally say is that 80 to 85% of families can do this on their own, working with their professionals. 10 to 15% of people need an outside facilitator to help run this and keep things going. And then there's 5 to 10% of people that no one's going to be able to help because they just don't want to get along with one another. And that's the unfortunate thing. But there is, if there's enough dysfunction within a family, there is some advantages to having that outside succession planning coordinator, is what they call it.
What do you do if I will keep using myself as an example? 3 siblings, we all live next to each other, we all get along. 2 on the farm, 1 off. What if the dad what if the parent is just is scared to death and it's too hard? And it didn't. Those conversations earlier on just fell on deaf ears. What do you do, and how much do you push? How does this generation push enough to get those answers and get something done? What help can you provide that to kind of get that pot moving?
Well, and it depends what you're talking about. It depends on if you're just talking about trying to get something set up legally, or if you're actually trying to make sure if you're the farming heir that you make sure that your equity is being built, as I said earlier. You know, again, as I said, what I routinely see is son or daughter comes back to the farm, spends decades investing their time and effort into it, and they're not given any value for sweat equity, right? And so we haven't mentioned sweat equity yet, but let me give you an example. Producer calls me, says, I stayed local, all my brothers and sisters left. I've never taken a dime from the farm, but I help mom and dad nights and weekends for the last 25 years, right?
Yeah.
You know, I've helped dad buy some additional land. I've helped him buy a new combine, all of this stuff. He said, I just learned that mom and dad went to the attorney and the trust says everything's split 5 ways. You know, what's my options? And I'm like, unfortunately, what you're telling me is you've been building sweat equity through the years, but your mom and dad are not giving you any credit for it. And so that goes back to those conversations I have with those young producers. You can't come back unless there's some roadmap, some guarantee for how you're going to be compensated for your sweat equity. That's why I like that phase 3. Let them start buying into the operation, soon getting to own something. Don't wait until the funeral to reward them for what they do through the years. So sweat equity is one part of that conversation that we have to have. But, you know, if mom and dad just absolutely will not have the conversation, if I'm the farming heir, and what I tell those young producers is if you are stuck in phase 2, you don't own anything, you have to go home and have it out with them. And if they will not have the discussion at some point, I'm sorry, you have to leave and go elsewhere. Because I don't want that same person coming back to me 25 years later and saying, man, I wish I'd listened to you because now the nursing home's getting the farm or my stepmom's getting the farm and I've got nothing to show for the last 25 years worth of effort.
I'm thinking of all the conflicts. Is there any of the conflicts we've not, or scenarios we've not covered that would be fairly common?
Oh, I don't know. There's always conflict, right?
Yeah,
Families are messy.
Yeah,
Families are just messy. So
when you think of those conflicts and facing that transfer, because it happens at different stages in every operation, if listeners today can take away one thing, 2 things surrounding those conflicts, what would that be?
Well, to deal with it now. To not sit on it and wait on it is one of the big things. You know, one of the things I'm really big on is I don't want any decisions to be left to be made after the funeral. How to split the farm, what the value is if someone wants the cash instead. I don't want any of those decisions to be left to be made. Give you an example. One farm today, guy dies, no kids, so he leaves the farm to his 6 nieces and nephews.
6, that's a lot to divide.
Yeah. Were the 6 nieces and nephews actually owed anything? No, it's not their mom or dad, right? They're not owed anything. 5 of the 6 want to keep it in the family. 1 is seeing dollar signs.
Yeah.
I've had to repeatedly tell them, you know, if your uncle had sat down and had these conversations with each of you, I'll guarantee you this person would not have acted like such a jerk in front of his uncle because he wasn't owed anything. It's the same thing with your mom and dad. If mom and dad will do the hard work and have the conversations with the kids, have family meetings, your kids probably aren't going to act like complete jerks, money hungry in front of their parents. The chances of working out a workable scenario increase exponentially. But again, if you wait and say, I'll let them figure it out after you're gone, that's when the knives come out.
So let's flip the script a little bit. What do I do as a mom of young kids? What are the best tools in my toolbox to prepare my kids for those conversations? I've got 6 and 11-year-old girls who I pray they want to be a part of the farm and be that next generation. What do I start? Or I should start now. I know the answer is yes, but how?
So we focused a lot on, when I talked about the 5 phases, that 3rd phase was management and ownership. We've talked a lot about the ownership side of it, but we really haven't focused on the management side. So succession planning starts when you give your kids their very first set of chores. Do you micromanage them? Do you tell them exactly how they have to do their chores? And if they don't do it the way you expect it done, you criticize and gripe at them? Or do you prepare your kids to be problem solvers and to figure out how to do things better. Now, again, kids young, this is all relative, right? But you want to prepare them to do it without you when you're gone. And so do you give them chores and tell them what you expect them to accomplish? Give them a little bit of guidance, but set them loose to figure out how to do it on their own and figure out how to be problem solvers. And that's why that phase 3, they start taking on some management responsibilities. And it's small at first, right? But you put them in charge of one of the rental farms, or you put them in charge of one set of calves to feed. One of the best examples, one of my larger cattle feeders tells the story about, he said he just graduated the 8th grade and was going to be a freshman in high school that fall. And his dad came to him one morning and said, "Hey, son, you see that empty pen over there? I want you to go to the sale barn this week, and I want you to buy some calves, and I want you to feed them this summer." And he said, "I'm not going to tell you what to do. I'm not going to tell you what to feed. I'm not going to tell you when to sell them. That's your pen to manage. And I will answer any questions if you want to ask me, but I'm not going to tell you what to do." And he says, he said, that first summer or two, I didn't do very well. I made a lot of mistakes, but my dad let me make them. He let me learn. I am convinced we often treat our kids like hired hands, not business successors. And you ask about other conflicts, I would say that's probably the other big conflict we haven't addressed is the power struggles. Who's the boss? Who's calling the shots? I already mentioned, when you grow up in the family business, it's really hard for dad to ever see you as equal and not son or daughter. Well, that phase 3, you start getting to take on some of those management responsibilities. Why is it so hard for dad or grandpa to give up control to the younger generation, start letting them make
decisions? Because they're men? No, well, I'm joking.
No, there is, they might screw it up. They might do it differently. I didn't get to take over till I was 65 years old. There's all of those things. But you are a little bit right. There's a difference between men and women often. And it's much harder for men to give up control. And what I've found is, there's some generational things, there's some generational type differences. But for men, it's their identity. If I'm not a farmer, what am I? And so giving up that control is almost like giving up their identity. How does the average person that works a job in town look at retirement? It's something they look forward to.
Yeah, they're counting down the days.
The day I get to celebrate retirement.
Farmers never retire.
Because they're afraid of it. They're afraid of it because what am I if I'm not a farmer? And so that's one of the biggest challenges of what I do is helping the older generation realize the most important role they will ever have is not the CEO of the farm or ranch, but it's the advisor or mentor to the next generation, and letting them take on more and more responsibility through phase 3 and phase 4 and phase 5. But while you're there to support them and help them, where I see the biggest train wrecks are where farmers don't ever let the younger generation see the checkbook, or they don't ever let them have responsibility for decisions. They let them make production decisions, like when to move the cows or when to start cutting beans, but they don't ever let them have true management responsibilities in the financial side.
To see the risk.
Those are the ones that crash and burn after mom and dad are gone. And it's really not the kid's fault. It's the older generation's fault because they never prepared them. They never gave them a chance to learn.
As we wrap up, I think there's another topic that I know that you and I could talk hours on, and that's personalities. My mom was a high school counselor, and she introduced True Colors to me in junior high. And so you name that personality assessment, I probably have taken it.
Yep.
But you do coaching in this also, and educating. How does personalities and True Colors, green, blue, gold, orange. How do they come into play on the farm? And because you understand that, as that mediator, as that educator, are you kind of psychoanalyzing the people?
Yeah. You're right. There's a ton of them. Enneagram, True Colors, DISC. There's all the different Myers-Briggs. There's all the different tests out there. But what they highlight is the way that you do things differently than someone else, but they also help you learn how to adjust your personality to communicate better with someone else. And so that's one of the first things you do when you go walk into a family that's got conflict. You sit down and do a fun personality test with them, and they can see, oh, that's why my uncle is that way or whatever, and it's not a good or bad. I often, whenever I'm doing HR classes, I tell them go down to the Dollar Tree and buy 4 sets of cheap sunglasses that are 4 different colors. And when you're dealing with someone that's a bright orange and you're a strong green, try to look through your orange sets of lenses, because there's not good or bad personalities. It's just different lenses that we look through.
And we need them all to be successful.
Absolutely. And so it just helps us realize how I need to adjust my communication styles for those that are different than me. And so absolutely. That's something that you do with families that are in conflict. And it's a fun exercise. It can be a fun family meeting just to break the ice sometimes.
Well, you said the one takeaway was act now. Don't wait.
Absolutely. Have you ever been on a large plane that had to land on a short runway? A big plane that had to land on a shorter runway than it really needed. That's a rough landing, right?
Scary.
It's scary. It's scary and it's dangerous. You can get thumped against the person next to you. You can get thumped against the chair or the seatbelt. People can get hurt. And if the pilot is not really, really good, that plane can go off the end of the runway and crash and burn. Succession planning is very much like a runway. The sooner you start having those discussions, the longer the runway you got and the smoother the landing can be. But if you wait until, as you said, Dad's just been diagnosed with cancer and we got 6 months to get this done, or heaven forbid, the funeral was yesterday, that's a very short runway. Some family members are going to get hurt in the process. And as you started out this, you may never have another Christmas party, family Christmas party for your household. And if you're not really, really good and have a little bit of luck along the way, you may not get stopped before the end of the runway, and you could end up with a for sale sign on your farm or ranch.
Well, I think I hit the nail on the head when I was prepping the team today about what you're going to talk about. I was like, he's just here to scare the crap out of all of us. Because it doesn't matter if you what you come from. Everybody has assets and everybody wants a plan for the future. And we all have to act now. 2 questions that I have had fun asking all my guests so far.
Okay.
Nothing pertaining to anything we've talked about today.
Okay.
What would you tell your 18-year-old self? After living the life you've lived and working for Extension for 24 years, I believe you said, what would you tell that 18-year-old Wesley?
Wow, that's an interesting one. You see, you should have prepared me.
No.
You're wanting to ambush me.
That is my goal, is to ambush.
Take lots of experiences and see different things. I think we live in one of the best parts of the country, but I wish I'd have traveled a little bit more and seen a little bit more of other things. And, because once you settle down and have kids, you're going to stay right here probably for the rest of your life.
That's true. And one more. Did you ever have a plan B? Was an educator always your career goal? Or what was that? Was there ever, if this didn't work out?
No, I didn't go straight from college to the university. So straight from college, I went out and worked in industry for a while and wanted to make the big bucks, right? And so that's what I did. And so, I was in sales in ag industry for quite a while. But the one thing that I never quite enjoyed as much about industry is I always had to sell a product. And with the university, I'm strictly here to help people and to help make their lives better. And so I eventually came back and went back and got my master's degree and have been with the university ever since.
No matter what you talk about, whether it's taxation, succession planning, personalities, the passion you have for that topic, it rains through. Whether you're on stage or you're sitting across behind 2 mics on camera, it rains through. And so a true educator you are. Thank you, Wesley, for sitting down with us and letting us go beyond the bank, letting us go beyond the gates and talk about keeping that farm in the family.
Well, I appreciate you having me today.
Thanks. Thanks for joining me for another episode of Beyond the Gates. If you're watching on YouTube, like and subscribe. New episodes drop every other Wednesday. For more content, follow Around the Ozarks and Beyond the Gate on Facebook and Instagram, and subscribe to the daily newsletter at AroundTheOzarks.com. Join us next time for more stories of grit, growth, and the spirit of rural life.